Well, I know we've wanted to know a lot about that for a long time. That was a very insightful presentation, and we thank Intervest and Barry for sharing the information with us. As we move along, we're going to get into regulatory updates, and we have two presenters. Our first is Jody Jones, who graduated summa cum laude from West Virginia University in 2001 with degrees in political science and sociology. Received a Juris Doctorate from WVU College of Law in 2005 and was admitted to the West Virginia Bar in 2005. In 2009, he served as counsel to the House Minority for the West Virginia Legislature. From 2009 to 11, he served as counsel to the Office of the Oil and Gas Division of Air Quality at the West Virginia Department of Environmental Protection. Since September of 11, he has worked for Chesapeake Energy Corporation and is currently a regulatory affairs for the Appalachian South Business Unit. In October of 13, he was appointed co-chair of the OOGA Technical Committee. We'll also be sharing time with Melissa Hampshire, and she is the Vice President of Environmental Health, Safety, and Regulatory for Eclipse Resources Corporation. Melissa has decades of experience in the oil and gas industry, has served as a corporate officer in multiple basins for the last decade. In addition, she enjoys her current roles as a member of the OOGA Board of Trustees and as a chair of the OOGA Environmental Committee. Melissa has held board positions on multiple industry groups across various states and has participated with those industry groups in creating industry best management practices. Melissa holds a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Engineering as well as Bachelor of Science in Structural Design and Construction Engineering from Penn State University. Welcome these two to the stage, and hopefully we'll learn a lot more. And I want to say one more thing. It's really good to have folks like this working behind the scenes on our behalf and bringing with them the things they've learned in industry. So welcome to the stage our two presenters. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Is the clicker? Oh, yeah, it's me. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for you. To those of you that are still in the room, I really got to thank Sean. Last year, he opened up a bar outside when I was beginning to speak, and a bunch of people left the room. And this year, I credit it to being the double hitter of St. Patrick's Day and the opening day of the NCAA tournament. Speaking of which, I know there's not a lot of Ohio teams in the tournament this year, so if you're looking for a team to root for, the West Virginia Mountaineers is the way to go. All right. Come on. First up, the obligatory disclaimer. Basically, I'm here on behalf of the association. Nothing I say today represents any individual company or the opinion of any agency, especially. So basically, that means I'm not liable for anything that comes out of my mouth. Yes. Oh, back. First off, the major sweeping regulatory change in 15 was the horizontal well site construction rule, which probably most of you in this room are familiar with. 2-year-long process, really started back in 14, kind of dropped off or died off for a little while, but then picked back up at a frantic pace. In 15, in January, they released the final draft, and it was on from there. There were multiple rounds of meetings and comments and things like that with the agency, which the association participated in heavily. The rule itself went into effect in July of 2015. The biggest thing about this rule, it was a sweeping change. It took up until now, an unregulated portion of the horizontal drilling process that was unregulated or not part of DNR's regulation and brought it in, and now it is wholly regulated through an individual permit process. So if you look at some of the things, there's a typo on my part. It is no longer a draft rule, but it defines the construction process and establishes the requirements in the approval process for your construction permits. It has slope stability and bearing capacity factors that you have to meet on your engineering design. There's about a 55-day total permit review time frame, although I think most operators would probably agree that it's significantly less right now. Part of that's because of the downturn overall, and so there's less applications than DNR anticipated, but I also think that as we've gotten our feet underneath this rule, and as DNR has as well, that we're both learning from each other, and that's easing the process and aiding the speed at which these permits get reviewed. It does not include freshwater or other impoundments, and there's no financial or surety required as part of the application or permit process. It is completely separate from the drilling process, and a big win that we were able to secure was that seasonal tree clearing or vegetative clearing is not part of the definition of construction. So what that essentially means is that any Indiana bat or northern long-eared tree clearing restrictions are not, we can clear trees out of season, and that's not considered construction, so we can do that outside of a permit to secure that we can begin building during the summer months. A couple of the minor issues that we've seen since this rule's been implemented are things like the impact of the modification process and how that's being worked out. And another thing would be well connects. You had pads that were built 2 or 3 years ago, wells were drilled waiting on pipeline, and so now pipeline needs to be laid to connect to these wells. Sometimes they're trenching up cut or fill slopes, so we, figuring out that process with DNR and how you work that with them has ultimately, I think, been settled out for about every other operator. There's been 78 permits to date that have been issued, and 12 are currently in progress. So overall, I think that the implementation and adoption of that rule has went quite well. Come on. All right, incident notification. For those of you that have not heard about this rule, it began as legislation. It kind of got tossed around through that process and eventually vetoed by the governor with the promise that it was going to become an emergency rule. Well, it never became an emergency rule and is now going through the formal rulemaking process. We've had several meetings with DNR that have went very well in reviewing this legislation, and they're very open and receptive to our feedback, and they've been very clear to us about what they expect and what they're looking for out of the rule. And what the rule is going to do, it outlines events which trigger reporting to the agency and how you're going to report. Some of the events would be safety related, such as blowouts, uncontrolled releases of gas, primarily related to a health and safety impact, H2S releases, and fire or explosion that also require some type of emergency medical response. And on the spill side, you've got spills of crude and condensate, brine, or hazardous material as defined by the existing federal rules. A couple important things to note on this rule that everybody should be paying attention to out there is we're still working on the language, but DNR has kind of staked its position that there could be certain circumstances where a contractor may have to make a notification on your behalf if you're unavailable as the operator within a certain period of time frame, and that notification could be made or needs to be made. That contractor may need to make that notification for you. So that's obviously something, if you're an operator or a contractor, you need to have those parameters set in place once this rule's in effect when you're out there working on those sites about who's going to make those calls if one of these events occurs. Lastly, also, brine haulers are separately covered underneath the rule, so they have their own reporting requirements because as a brine hauler, you are a registered entity with DNR. A couple more important things about this rule. Crude and condensate, the spill limit is 5 barrels off of containment. But there is a separate section where it drops to 25 gallons if you're in what we call a sensitive area. And I don't remember all those off the top of my head, but one of them I believe is a 100-year floodplain or a 5-year time of travel for an underground drinking water supply. There's a couple others, but those are these areas where mainly DNR is concerned about that they're sensitive because of the impact that a spill could have, so they want that crude oil spill to be lower. But one important concession that DNR made was they initially had condensate grouped in with this refined oil product category, basically because condensate's thinner, it could travel easier, get into the ground quicker. But DNR did recognize that that's very unwieldy for the industry because defining what's crude and what's condensates on our site can really vary from operator to operator. And we urge DNR to say, look at it like this. You've got oil products that are made on the site and oil products that are brought onto the site. And if that's where you draw the line in your sand, it will be much more simple for everybody out there to understand, and DNR agreed with us. But in the next category, you have the refined oil products. So this would mean anything from rock oil that you use during drilling, compressor oil, or any other refined product that you bring onto the site for whatever purpose. Brines and sludges, that's a 1 barrel off of containment reporting standard. The hazardous substances the rule basically just pulls in everything from the existing state and federal rules that are already out there with the same reporting quantities that already exist and that everybody's already doing or should be doing. Again, brine haulers are covered individually. The standard for reporting is going to be 30 minutes or as soon as practical thereafter. That's one that DNR has been very staunchly adhering to. Some areas that we've made good gain in is that the amount of information that is going to be required when you report, DNR has understood that it is a lot of information, and following the rule by the letter of the law becomes very difficult to achieve in that 30-minute time frame to collect all this information. So we've had some important changes there, or some important awareness from DNR about our concerns, and additionally, there could be certain spills that may require a follow-up report at some point, probably 30 days in the future. And that's one of the things we kind of been working with DNRs. You don't need all of this information during this initial call that is supposed to be, hey, we've had something occur here, we're taking care of it, we're making you aware of it. And then if DNR wants more information, as in, if it's a spill, how you cleaned it up, what you did with the material, et cetera, then that would be the appropriate time to require that in a report, some point down the future. And also important to note, DNR has, I don't know what type of ultimate success they'll have with it, but they are very committed to having like a one-call scenario. Whereas when you make this call, if it is an event that would trigger reporting to CERC or the LEPC and DNR and possibly another agency, then that this call that you would make to DNR would be able to suffice with making all of those notifications at the same time. That will require some coordination with EPA and other agencies, but DNR has blatantly said in the meetings that they want to try to get that figured out because they understand our concerns that you've already got reporting requirements for under OEPA, and now this rule again, you're thinking this could be an emergency event, something you don't need to waste time on the phone necessarily. So a second call and a second time going through and providing all this information is time taking you away from responding to the event. So DNR does recognize that concern, and I think we'll be able to make some improvement in the final rule. I would expect, although we've not heard much from them in about a month and a half since the last meeting, I expect that in the pretty near future, we will see that rule begin to move through the broader stakeholder process and then eventually to CSI and JCAR. Looking out onto the horizon, you've got DNR's secondary containment rule. This is an old rule that has been circulating with DNR, but it's kind of new to us. It will ultimately define standards and how the industry will need to structure its secondary containment. There will probably be things affecting permeability rates and things like that for containment, such as dikes and berms, but we'll also, excuse me, but probably the big takeaway about this rule is that the one meeting we had with DNR, I think towards the end of last year, was that we looked at DNR and said, you seem to be focusing on, you want different plans for different stages, and it seems to be, again, very unwieldy, and why don't you maybe look at actually promulgating standards for different types of activity or tanks and things like that, and approaching it from, hey, what does the industry use, what's out there, and how does that need to be contained, and how does that containment need to look and operate and function, and approach it from that. And DNR, it seemed like the light bulb may have went off in their head a little bit, so I would anticipate, and next time we see a draft of that rule, that we see some significant changes there, beneficial changes. Facility rule governing off-site waste facilities. This rule it's been a long time since we've had a meeting. We know that it's still out there. The important thing is that it does not affect traditional operations. These are for ancillary waste handling facility sites that are primarily, all of them now are operating under a chief's order and have been for several years. I think the real delay in it is that there is some legislative issues in terms of insurance and bonding amounts that need to be worked out. But I believe once those issues are finally settled, you'll see this rule probably pick up steam and advance. Well spacing, It's DNR wants to adopt the horizontal well spacing pros from the take points to the unit boundary and to the parallel unit boundary from the producing section of the wellbore. Those spacing variances that they already give rather routinely that result in pretty large permit packets arriving on DNR's desk routinely, that they want to actually just put those into a rule and have them be the rules that we operate under or that we space our wells under during the permit process. The other thing would be that it actually reduces minimum unit size for every well. And I can't remember basically, but if whatever they are now, the draft rule or the direction DNR wants to head is that you cut those in half. So I think that for a well 4,000 feet and deeper, the minimum unit size is 40 acres. That will go to about 20. So I think that provides a lot of relief for conventional operators because the amount of land and area that you'd have to be able to draw your plat and permit your well is essentially cut in half. 5-year rule review, DNR has been notified that it will go underneath or has to complete a 5-year rule review. It has been a long time since this agency's done it. Oil and gas has been told it will go last because they know it has the potential to be an extremely painful process. But we're going to work with them. One thing is if they make minor modifications, those rules have to go through the Common Sense Initiative process, which means a business impact analysis, and go through JCAR. So for such things as changing commas or correcting typos, that's a lot of work for the agency. It's things that have to be done from time to time as part of this process. So we're going to work with them and help them where we can and supply them information. But we're also going to monitor the rules to make sure that nothing important to us gets changed. And we're also going to look for opportunities that say, hey, I know this, you had no intention of opening up this rule anytime soon, but now that you have to go through this process, can we look at this area of this rule or something that gives us, some heartburn or that we would like to see change? So we're going to, take that process and look at it very robustly and again, help the agency where we can, look for opportunities where we can, but also be defensive if there's situations that are presenting themselves where, again, DNR is taking rules and modifying them through that process, which I really don't anticipate. I think most of them, they'll just be cleaned up technically and ran through that process without any substantive change. Lastly, EPA's radioactive material program and landfill transfer facility rule. It's very embryonic at this point. It's basically just in the form of like a skeleton document with a little bit of substance to it. That's a regulation that doesn't govern us directly because it affects landfills, and I know there's some landfill folks in the room, but it does impact our industry because that's where we dispose of our waste. I don't know where this rule will end up ultimately, but I'm hoping and I'm optimistic that it will create some relief and ease some of the sampling and disposal requirements. Because part of the issue all along, and speaking with Department of Health and EPA with these rules, is that, hey, we need to understand what this waste is that you're generating out there. We don't know. It's all very new to us. And so we need time to look at this stuff, and we need help from the industry. And we've done our part. We have been helpful with the agencies and been supplying information. You've got profiles and all this data that's coming into the EPA and Department of Health pretty routinely. So I'm hoping at this point that they've got their arms around what the waste looks like and the different streams of waste. And now we can have discussions about, do you really need per box sampling when it's the same waste that's these 4 boxes, it's the same waste stream. So I hope that there's opportunities for relief in this rule. We'll just have to see. Lastly, DNR is out there looking for contractors. They're looking to ways to maximize their island orphan well budget. They did, I don't know how many projects last year, but they are out there actively plugging island orphan wells. They have a set amount of money in their budget every year that they have to spend. And what the man on the phone, that's Gene Keeney, he's out of the Uniontown office, and what DNR is doing is they have kind of created this process where no longer do you necessarily need to be a turnkey vendor. You don't need to be somebody that can do all of the plugging from A to Z. That's fine if you are, but if you're just a cement contractor, a dirt work contractor, some individual portion, you can apply and get into as part of DNR's bid process. And if you're awarded part of this contract, the benefit will be is that you're going to get your money directly from ODNR and not have to wait for the main contractor to get paid and then in turn remit payment to you. So if you're out there, if in DNR, part of the reason that they're doing this is they realize times are lean and that, a plugging contract or two a year to somebody, a service rig, a cement job, could actually, help keep somebody stay afloat. And so if you're in that position, or if you're able to do this work for the agency, it's very important work. There are a lot of idle and orphan wells out there. So one benefit is that we need to help DNR maximize their budget. And if at the end of the year, if they can eke out another plugging job because of a little bit of money that they saved throughout the way, that benefits DNR and it benefits us. So contact Gene, or if you're somebody out there who can assist with this. And that is all.
Good afternoon. All right. I'm going to give you a quick environmental summary, some of the things we've been working on in the Environmental Committee. Let's start with water. I'm sure a lot of you have heard this. The definitions of the waters of the U.S. has been a big topic. It was proposed by the EPA and the Army Corps, and the final rule was announced in May of 2015. Basically, what it did is it redefined the scope of waters protected under the Clean Water Act, and pretty much made every wetland, dry ditch, timber rut, hydraulically connected to surface water. So this was a real problem. Obviously, it would impact the oil and gas activities, requiring us to get Corps permits for every little ditch. OOGA commented on these rules when they were proposed, and the rule is being challenged by multiple states now and organizations and the courts across the country. On October 9th, this past October 9th, the U.S. Court of Appeals of the Sixth Circuit stayed the Clean Water Rule nationwide pending further review of the action. So I gave you a link there if you are interested in reading that. Please bring it up. Modifications to the 401 nationwide permit. Proposed by Ohio EPA in an effort to make Ohio's water quality certifications consistent with the Army Corps water quality certification. This will allow the industry to apply for a nationwide permit in certain instances instead of applying for the more burdensome individual permits. Comments were due in January of this year. OOGA did comment. There were also proposed administrative modifications to this rule, which are being proposed under the 5-year review process that Jody was discussing. They all appear to be benign, though. Comments were due February 9th, and we have commented on that as well. The draft rules for facilities, I think Jody talked about these a little bit. The next rule package is expected to come out by ODNR then. New waste regs. We had proposed effluent limitation guideline rules proposed by the EPA in April 2015, and the comment period closed in July of 15. Basically, the proposed rules addressed discharge and disposal of wastewaters associated with horizontal onshore drilling activities to publicly owned water treatment facilities. Basically, it would not allow any discharges of oil field water waste into publicly owned water treatment facilities. And we're currently awaiting the final rule, and there's the link to that one for anybody who's interested in reading more. Okay, the Endangered Species Act, of course, there's always a lot to talk about here. The northern long-eared bat was listed as threatened April 2nd, 2015. We did get that final 4D rule in January of 16. The final 4D rule recognized that white nose syndrome is really the threat here to the bat. But the new rule protects the bat in its most vulnerable stages during maternity roost, spring and fall staging, and hibernation. But with the 4D rule, it's much tolerable than what was originally proposed. And keep in mind that you still have to abide by the Indiana bat rules. The Eastern Massasauga, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's the way I pronounce it, rattlesnake, U.S. Fish and Wildlife proposed this rattlesnake as threatened listing in September of 15. Comments were due November of 15. OOGA is following this, but we're not commenting on it at this time. But the range of the rattlesnake is all in the eastern U.S. The species is already designated as endangered in Ohio by ODNR. And the human disturbance of the snake's habitat, particularly with agriculture, seems to be the problem. So we're kind of waiting to see how that one goes. The Ohio Pollinator Habitat Initiative. Am I on the right slide? There we go. Better? Okay. The Ohio Pollinator Habitat Initiative, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife and ODNR are promoting this initiative together. The agencies are looking for the voluntary planting of native vegetation that will attract pollinator species when reclaiming drill sites. My company, Eclipse Resources, is actively participating in something similar to this, but it's very easy to do, to set up butterfly gardens or pollinator gardens on the well sites. Anybody who's interested in doing that kind of a thing, flag me down and I'll give you some tips on how to do that. The key, though, is depending on where you're working, you want to make sure that you're planting native species. This initiative could benefit the monarch butterfly and bees. With that being said, 2 days ago, the yellow-banded bumblebee was proposed on U.S. Fish and Wildlife site as threatened and potentially endangered. So, we have another one coming along with the monarch butterflies with this bumblebee. So pollinator gardens are definitely a good way to go. Also, they proposed to remove the American burying beetle from the list. And if you remember a year or two ago, that was a pretty big deal, getting that on the list, and now they're talking about taking it off. Everybody's favorite subject, air. Okay, the NSPS rules. This includes source determination for the oil and gas industry, new and modified sources, and control technology guidelines. It will set methane and VOC requirements. OOGA has commented on this suite of rules in December. OOGA previously filed comment through a petition with the DC court to make sure our comments got on record, and there's a link to that rule. With NEPA, this guidance requires consideration of greenhouse gas emissions and the effects of climate change in NEPA reviews. This relates to our industry and the social cost of carbon, hydraulic fracturing, and environmental review and permitting. The proposed draft guidance is presented by the White House Council for Environmental Quality, and the comment period, I believe, closed in March, so now we're just kind of waiting to see. There are proposed amendments to the petroleum and natural gas source category for greenhouse gas reporting. This proposed rule focuses on leak detection and proposes new emissions factors for calculating GHG. For anybody who's interested in seeing that rule, it's in 40 CFR Part 98, Subpart W. We did comment on that as well. Feeling that, without the Quado rules being finalized, we really can't, agree to anything that's in the W, in subpart W. Okay, methane existing source emissions reduction on March 10th of 16, which was just last week. The Obama administration again targeted the oil and gas industry with a plan to require oil and gas operators with existing wells to provide US EPA with emissions information through an information collection request. This all goes along with the Obama climate change rules. They will use this information then to kind of lay out more stringent rules for us as far as air emissions for operating existing sources. So if you have, conventional wells, this would be a kind of a mind blower. If they did become more stringent, it would not, you could get to the point where your wells are no longer economical. So it's a pretty substantial package there. The emissions permit suite, Ohio EPA has come up with General permit suite for equipment at compressor sites and production facilities. Kind of makes it a lot easier to get general permits when you install a D-high or swap out engines. But the permit suite is currently up for comment, and I have the site there to connect to it. That's all I have, Penny.
If anyone has questions, please raise your hand up high. I'll come find you.
Will those links be posted on the OOGA website that you gave? Because I can't write that fast.
I believe Penny can answer that. Will you be able to find the presentations, right?
You know what, I'll have to check with Janine.
So we can get copies of the presentations. Also, I believe you have my email, so just you need the links, I'll email it to you.
Any other questions?
Jody as well, too. Anybody? Now that we woke everybody up, enjoy your St. Patrick's Day, everyone. Thank you, Jody.
We need to turn the lights around, shine them that way. That definitely will wake you up. These two put a lot of effort into trying to keep an eye on all this stuff and heading it off at the pass. Oftentimes we don't find out what happens till after it's too late. But we're trying to stay out in front, and with Sean and the staff and good folks from industry like that, we're able to try to keep in front of it. Doesn't always go completely the way we want in the end, but it helps a lot. So